All right, well, hello. It's so nice to meet you. Thank you for
You as
joining me
well.
here.
You
I am
as
excited
well.
for this conversation. So, I want to start with you. I want you to tell me about yourself, and you can take that whatever way, whatever way that you want to. So, I'm going to leave it open-ended for that.
Okay. Um, it's funny, I feel so out of practice talking about myself since the virus. It's just kind of, we've all been sequestered. Um, but I'm born and raised in New York City, native New Yorker, um, and child of immigrant parents. My family is from my father's side. They came from Yemen and settled in Israel. Um, and my mother's side, she was born in Bombay, and her family were Iraqi Jews that fled Baghdad and settled in India. And my parents met in the Sinai and came to. My mom eventually, came here and brought my dad over to New York. And I grew up in New York. I was a theater kid. I was immersed deeply in New York in the poetry scene and the performance scene, and kind of started working pretty early, around, the I would say as a young teen. It was a way for me to be able to be out of the house and experiencing life in New York, and to have more independence, having a kind of an insular family, wanting to be out in the world. And when I was 19, I spent a year in Albuquerque. I kind of fled New York, slash escaped, um, and spent a year there performing poetry and working in restaurants, to make ends meet. And then when I came back, I wanted to find a way to do my art and still pay the bills. Um, and so I started working in nonprofits, um, probably started around the age of 20, 21, maybe I would say around that age, um, and spent many years as doing administrative work because I thought, my job is my job. I want to be of some service in that realm, working for mission-based organizations. And I kept that very separate from my artistic life, which happened after 5 o'clock. And I saw it as my kind of like my real life, after five. And then I had this work life that felt very compartmentalized. Um, and spent years immersed in the poetry scene here, doing a bit of teaching as well, um, and worked for various organizations with various missions, Planned Parenthood, Federation of America, etc. And so I eventually, for many years, studied flamenco dance here in the city. I also have a dance background, and say around, was it 2007, I had been to Spain a couple of times to study flamenco. I had a someone that was a close family friend that sponsored me to be able to go there and study. I had been laid off, and he said, I want to give you this gift to go study flamenco. I fell in love with Spain, and then I came back and saved all my pennies to move there. And I spent 3.5 years living there and teaching business English. So it was kind of my path has not been linear at all, um, and kind of non-traditional in a lot of ways. And then also traditionally, always having this like 9 to 5 structure. And then I came back from Spain, struggled there a lot. It was financially very difficult there, hard to make ends meet, hard to study dance and do both. And after 3.5 years of struggling, I said, I have to go home. And I came back here, and I spent the last 9 years working for a nonprofit that equips faith leaders working at the intersection of faith and social justice, kind of like a leadership development center, and I would say leadership development and research center as well. And kind of worked my way up there, started out as an administrator, and then really this was a place that I started to bring my artistic identity into the work, and built a role for myself where I was doing like administrative and data management, and then arts and ritual advisor. So I was advising the programmatic staff around how to bring art and creativity and poetry and imagination into how we were working with communities, and how to use art um, as a way to open doors to difficult conversations, um, and a way to create safer space. I don't like to say safe space, but safer or brave space, for people to speak across divides. And then over the last 3.5, 4 years, was I I would say I kind of fell into um, development, and that's the last area I thought I would work in. If you asked me if I wanted to work with the money stuff or fundraising, I would have said keep me far away from that. I don't know anything about money. I didn't grow up with money. Money was, came from my parents came from poverty mentality. There was like zero money education, and the woman who was running this department at the organization was looking for her number, like a right-hand person, and came into my office and said, "You are emotionally intelligent and you're a good writer. I need you to help me with grants." And I said, "That's insane. I don't know anything about fundraising. I'm not interested." And she said, "You're a storyteller. You're a writer. You're a poet. This is what grant writing is. You're relational. You're good one-on-one. That's it." She said, "The science of it, I can teach you." I said, "Well, I don't know about budgets. I don't know what is a budget. I don't know how that works." She says, "I'll show you." And so it really was learning on the job. And I was blessed enough to be kind of thrown into a job, right? Um, and I learned from zero and became the director of institutional partnerships at this organization, um, and learned a skill set that really came as a surprise to me. And the bigger surprise is that I already had a lot of those skills. I didn't know it. It took someone being able to see it in me, um, being able to translate, you're good at talking to people, into, how to represent a program, how to speak passionately about the work, and also being able to use language. And so in February, I actually left this organization. I just felt at 9 years, it was time for me to do something else. And this was about 2 weeks before the pandemic. And so now I find myself questioning whether or not I want to do what I've done for the last 2 decades, which is be in an office 9 to 5. And I'm thinking, how can is freelance a possibility for me? I never thought it was. I come from, like, the way my family has trained me is, I don't care what job you have, just have a job with insurance. So the bar, it wasn't like, go get a master's degree or a PhD, or just have a job. And in some way, the bar was set pretty low, right? Because it's just any job. So if I told my parents that I was going to do freelance, they would freak out, right? But so now I'm starting to build that slowly, working with one client. What does it mean to do grant writing and strategy, and to be a development consultant, and start to imagine myself in a group of people that I didn't think I belonged in, right? Or that I didn't think was possible. And also, I'm holding the question, what does it mean to be a creative person? When, like, where does that fit in? What does creativity look like? How does it show up in non-traditional ways when I'm not able to work on poetry and work on artistic projects? I also, after Trump was elected a few years ago, out of the Women's March, a few of the artistic directors of the Women's March created a women's chorus called the Resistance Revival Chorus. And so I've been singing with them since its inception. I've been involved in community building around that. And we're not doing a lot of outside performing right now, but that has been a great source of joy for me, that the chorus has been given a huge platform at this point. It's very connected, and it's starting to, people are learning about it, and that's been, you know, an exciting group to be a part of. So that's kind of like, there's more, but that's like a kind of how I got here.
That is good. And I see so much of our amazing students in you, and they're going to just benefit from this. And the question I would ask them as a follow-up, I've got a bunch of questions I've written down based on that. But the question I want to ask you is, if there weren't any barriers and you did have all the privileges that I really have, and so many other people and men have, what do you see your kind of the biggest version of your dream life as you sit here now? What would that look like? You sound like you have one in your head. What if there were no barriers, if insurance wasn't an issue, if money really wasn't an issue, how would you impact the world in that way? What would that look like for you?
I think it would be, you know, I first want to say that this question I've always struggled with, because I was conditioned to, I wasn't conditioned to think big, right? And so even at, you know, I'll be 42 in August. Even at this age, I still, you know, someone said this to me at a party, in a New Year's Eve party, and I was thinking about leaving my job. It was my partner's boss, who's very connected. She used to work at the Kennedy Center, and she asked me, she's like, oh, I could connect you with, she says, what's your dream job? And I got paralyzed, because I was like, wow, I've been taught to just live a life that's in some ways just good enough. And I think some people would look at my life and say, she is living dream, you know, she has dreamt big. She went to Spain, she studied, but it has, it's different from the outside also. But I think in this roundabout way, I would answer your question to say, it's important for me to be of service in some way. And that doesn't have to be connected to my job. It's how I show up in my relationships, the role I play with my family and my close loved ones. But I think if I didn't have to have a traditional job, I would spend my days in the theater. And I would be around a creative community. I would be thinking about what art can do, what doors art can open, what is the role of the artist, especially in today's political climate. And I would think about what kind of, how I could be of service, I think. And maybe, you know, those two being married, the art and service, because it's not always that way. There's a lot of self-indulgent art out there. I think that's my nebulous answer.
I love it. And that I see, again, so much of you and our students, and privilege is everything to me, and why I'm so confident and why I do think big. And even though I have achieved far less than you in life, but I still have in my mind that there is no ceiling, and I'm able to go after those things and pursue it. And I think that's what we're doing right now, as I am pursuing it.
Great.
But I also think what you said had value in that it doesn't have to be job related. And that's something I need to rephrase my question, because when there's money involved, so often it takes away from your overall goal. The other thing that I noticed right away is that women are so different in this. And I feel I could ask this question to men, and
Yeah.
so often they would have an answer, but also
Yeah.
their answer wouldn't be based on service to others. And that's
Right.
why I want to figure out a way to get money in your hands and these women's hands, so that you can do these things, because the world will become so much perpetually better without the kind of greed factor that is so often, I think,
Yeah.
a privileged thing and also a male thing. Okay, I want to
Yeah.
value your time, so I want to get to some of these other questions.
Okay.
You told me briefly about your life, and us briefly about your life. If you could go back now, what would you change? And then there's kind of a second part to that question. And along with what would you change, what are things that were considered setbacks at the time that they happened that actually did propel you towards your goals, or that you perceived negatively initially that ended up being something that turned out to be a positive in your life?
So many things. I mean, I think um, I don't want to say that I regret things, but I wish that I had loved myself more through. Are you talking about events or just perception? You know, things that kind of happened to me, or is it open-ended?
Open-ended. I want you to talk to, again, I don't have the same lived experience as you certainly, but a lot of my
Yeah.
students do. And so I like the way you took it internally, because that's something also that so many young women, especially young women of color and underprivileged young women of color, have to struggle with. So yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I think, um, I think about, so I didn't have a lot of, I wish I had had more role models around um, what it what it meant to hold yourself in higher regard. And I would say that um, it's sweeter. The flip side of that is that it's sweeter now because I see the journey that I went on, and whether it's trauma that I experienced or general day-to-day challenges, suffering, pain. Um, the flip side of having experienced those things and not having been in a self-loving place, which is not a place you arrive at. You don't wake up one day and just love yourself. It's a forever journey. Um, and it has allowed me to deepen my own empathy and compassion for others. It's like I feel like the internal emotional well that I hold runs deep. And I I look back and I wish that I hadn't experienced suffering, and that I hadn't experienced trauma, that I hadn't experienced pain, and that I'd loved myself more, and had more confidence and held myself in higher regard. But I also um, see that it I have more tools in my toolbox. That makes sense. Um, or to use a musical metaphor, I'm not playing one note. I'm playing many notes. And being able to play many notes allows me to connect with all different kinds of people, and that I can sit face to face with most people, I'd say, and find a point of connection, because I haven't lived my life in a box. And my privilege of growing up in New York is a huge part of that. Being able to grow up in a place that isn't, um, uh, the same store and the same people over and over again. That's my immense privilege. Um, to be faced, look, I've been able to, because of various privileges that I have, be in the working world, and because of um, those privileges, I've been able to slowly work my way up. And not to say that I don't look at other people my age around me and say, oh, so and so is a president and she's my age. Why am I at this level and she's at this level? And I see that disparity, and it's very easy to get caught up in that.
How can these young women, earlier than you did even, it sounds like you're still struggling with this, is gain confidence? And how can they see the beauty within themselves? And what kind of advice do you have for that, of self-love, self-care, being in positive relationships, just kind of things that you wish you would have figured out earlier?
Mhm. I mean, I think, I was lucky to find a wonderful therapist who was willing to take me at a very low fee. She doesn't take insurance. And I have been with her weekly, sometimes twice a week for the last 9 years. The work that we do on ourselves is the work of our lives, I believe. I see it as part of my mission, as one's mission um, to become my best friend. The way you would sit with your pal and learn about your pal's dislikes, likes, stories, hurts, pains. That dialogue with the self, I see as integral. And I look at my trajectory from how I felt about myself in my early 20s and how I feel about myself now. And it's night and day, and it's still a journey. And that it's always in flux. But I think also looking at who the company that I'm keeping has been a huge part of it. Because friends that love you will reflect back to you how they see you. And it's not going to change your mind overnight. If your friends think you're amazing and you're a rock star, and they tell you, Sabrina, you're a rock star. What do you mean? You can do this. But I don't believe it. It's not something that changes overnight, but it does help. Because you think, well, it's a very different message than I was getting as a kid, right? And so there is healing in that. And I think also finding, learning how to resource yourself, which is kind of like a buzzword now people are using. And what that means is when I'm in a bad place and I'm in a dark place and I'm not feeling good about myself, I've built practices to resource myself, meaning taking long walks, cooking a meal, calling my sister, calling a friend, turning off the phone, meditating, putting on my favorite song. What are these small practices that I can have at the ready, like using that toolbox metaphor again? I'm not always successful at it. Sometimes I'm in a bad place and I forget it all. I forget to resource myself and I sit there and have a pity party. But sometimes I don't. And sometimes I can say, okay, I can slow myself down enough, the story, right? To say, this is a story and it's not the truth, right? We tell ourselves a lot of stories. I can never do this. So-and-so said I can't do this, so I can't do it. I'll never be, right? And seeing them as like novels on a shelf instead of like internalizing them has also been helpful. But I mean, I could go on about this topic for hours, so I'm going to stop because that's something that I actually feel very passionately about and very passionately connected to wanting to help younger people understand as well. So I'll stop there.
It seems like a lifelong journey. Is that something that you believe, if you had resourced yourself younger, would have helped you with kind of your internal dialogue at this point? Can that be done at a younger age?
100%. I mean, I had been in and out of therapy when in my 20s. And if I had started that work the way that I have done over the last decade, I think I would always recommend someone do that. I think I'm really happy with where I've landed now and how I feel about myself now. And again, I always have to reiterate to people that self-confidence, self-love, self-care is not some gift you get and you keep it and you never feel crappy about yourself ever again. At least not for a lot of women or men that I know. But I think the value of starting that work as soon as possible can be life-changing. Absolutely life-changing, yes.
how do you, what would you say to young women who feel like they don't belong in certain situations? I've never been in a situation due to privilege where I feel like I don't belong. And even if I know I'm not at the level of other people, I know that I can get to that level, which is completely starkly different than the young women I'm working with who so often have been told they don't belong at these levels. How can you work on your confidence, those things that you perceive, but what kind of things can you do as far as putting yourself in different situations, pushing yourself for growth? What do you recommend young women do to help build their confidence and realize that they do belong at these tables and that they need to be at these tables so they can change the world?
Mhm. Well, they absolutely need to be at those tables, and the world needs them. And it's not about um, having a, you know, when I look at a room, if I'm in a meeting and I see a diverse set of folks in the room, it's not like you check a box, right? It is that um, that room is better for having those people in it. It's not that you want a diverse workplace because it looks good for you. Oh, that organization is better for having. So I mean that's a whole other tangent. But I think the don't belong part, um, I think it helps to have role models, to see someone that is like you being in situations where they have had to overcome that, um, and looking for those types of examples where you can. The problem is for some folks, they don't see themselves in a lot of um, those types of positions. Um, and I think as far as confidence, I mean, and this is more of an internal answer again, but I think speaking about it and talking about it, and not, if you play out the scene in your head, let's say you're in a situation where you were not accepted, you felt like you didn't belong, even if people went out of their way, you can still feel that way. Um, and feeling disheartened, leaving that space, going home, and keeping it silent and never talking about it. So I think finding people in your life that you can reflect on those feelings with, finding a community of people to who are either come from a similar cultural background as you, socioeconomic background. Um, I had friends. I was culturally isolated growing up. I didn't have people who had my cultural heritage, and so I found a best friend who grew up with immigrant parents, who was Russian, culturally nothing similar, but we could reflect on the particular things that come up being children of immigrants that did not grow up wealthy, for example. So finding people that can be your best fans, your biggest fans, I think helps retrain some of that negative self-talk. And I think culturally we don't, sometimes we think it's silly to pep talk ourselves, and being able to self-soothe also. So it's like two parts. You have the community care and family care, and then you have the self-care, which is being able to put your hand to your heart and say, this is hard, that was not fun. And just to be able to sit with that has been tremendous for me.
This is amazing, by the way. They're going to learn so much from this, and I'm learning so much from you too. So thank you again for your time. One of the other people we interviewed, Dr. Brenda J. Allen, who's just turned 70. She's finished her career as a professor and then administration at a college, and now is kind of like, I see her just getting started. She's going to publish more books and do more projects, and literally, has to be so good at saying no because she's in so much demand currently. The advice she gave to young women was, when there's doors open to go through them, when people give you opportunities to run with them, And what I've noticed early on is I've got a lot of young women that should be listening to this that won't, and they won't take the time to do it. And they, even someone that they've known me for 8 years, and they know where I come from and they know I want what's best for them, but still won't take advantage of these opportunities. Can you talk a little bit about that? The importance of that you're not going to be doing it all by yourself. There's no way you can. That when you do have opportunities to make sure you take advantage of them, and how, again, your internal dialogue, how you can get past that part of it, because so often all these things factor into it, and that's the reason they're not going forward, which will then hurt you in the long run. Can you discuss that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I have been faced with open doors that I have been absolutely terrified to walk through. I would probably say every open door that I've been faced with, I either didn't trust initially. I didn't trust also that I'd be capable enough to do what is required. And I'm shocked that even at this age, it's still there. I can push through it because I know it. It's like these things don't go away. I'm stronger in the face of them, right? I still, it still surfaces. And I don't like the phrase everything happens for a reason, because I don't believe that's necessarily true. But I see kind of an alignment and serendipity around being faced with this door kind of slowly opening in front of you. And if I were to look, it's a good question, something I haven't actually thought about, so I'm just speaking off the cuff, but I'm trying to slow down and think about, what have I done in those moments where I said, I don't want to do that. That's not for me. Is realize that I had separated the world into two kind of clubs, like groups, like I said before. The group of people that are successful and type A and overachievers, and then me. And to look at me from the outside, you'd say, well, I'm not, right? I am a go-getter. I have accomplished X, Y, Z, right? And being able to slow that moment down enough to say, wow, I'm really sabotaging myself. And that actually walking myself through what is the worst that could happen, whether it's like, watch this educational video, right? What is the worst that would happen? Like really walking myself through it. What is the worst that would happen if I watch this video? What is the worst that would happen if I accepted this job? Someone else thinks I can do it. I don't think I can do it. What's the worst that would happen? I'd be back where I was, right? And it does get easier. The fear doesn't go away, but it does get easier each time, because I don't think confidence is something you can talk yourself into. Just say, be confident. You should believe in yourself. Feel good about yourself. Hold yourself in high regard. You can't tell someone that. But I look at the actions I've taken, and I've seen challenges I've gone through, and then I've come out alive on the other end, and that starts to build. It's like they say, feel the fear and do it anyway. That's, I think, part of it. You don't have to stop being scared to do the thing. Be scared. Just keep moving and be scared while you're doing it. And then you keep putting your one foot in front of the other, and you're scared and you're terrified and you're still doing it. And it's only when you really look back and you're like, I did that. And then the next door opens and you're like, okay, I've gone through this door a few times and I'm still here. So really looking at like the historical evidence of your life, I think, is important too.
So many of our young women are introverts, and I think there's huge value in introverts. And I am not one, but I think that they listen better. I think that they are really thoughtful and introspective. And you're an artist, but it does sound like you've got some of that in you too, right? That you are an introvert, and then probably you almost put in a character when you're performing in different ways. Can you talk a little bit about that? Just the
Mhm.
strength of introverts that you know that are powerful, and kind of show them they have value.
Well, a lot of artists are introverts. When I'm on stage, I am able to kind of um, show up, but I consider myself in some ways to be very introverted. When I'm networking, when I'm talking to people, I have to kind of get there. It's not like an automatic. Um, I know that I can be. I have. It's like an introvert that's learned extroverted skills, and I've learned that I'm very good one-on-one, and then it's harder for me in a meeting, for example, with lots of people that I don't know. Um, it's much easier now than it was, let's say, a decade ago. I never used to speak up in meetings, and now um, I'm not afraid. So I think the value of introverts is that they, I think, have more information than extroverts. Introverts are listening, they're observing, they're watching. It's like they're collecting data, they take time to process it. And when they speak, at least I find I listen up more. And um, I find that they also make really good friends. Um, but as far as the workplace, I think I think it's good to be pushed, and I think in some ways being an introvert can feel like it's more challenging in the workplace because extroverts in some ways culturally we do value extroverts. The you know the squeakiest wheel gets the oil, whatever the phrase is. So, um, but as a fellow introvert, I've come to really value. Um, I remember at work we had a facilitator lead a group of women in philanthropy, and she was not your extroverted facilitator where she's jumping around the room with a microphone telling people what exercise is next. She was more soft spoken, but I realized what she was pulling out of the woman as far as discussion and perspective. um, I didn't realize it till afterwards that she did some sort of magic, where it's like she moved out of the way of the facilitation and allowed the women to shine. Um, and so I have a huge love affair for introverts, um, and I do believe that introverts can learn extrovert skills and know when to use them and how to use them. And then when you don't need them anyway, you put them away and you go back to reading your book in your house with your cup of tea. Um, and then learn, kind of putting that hat on um, when you need them.
I want to value your time, and I also want to value art. And so, my last question I want for you is, I guess, multifaceted. I want to know about how you feel art, what art should look like in society, and the importance of art in society, which is a big question. But also, we've got so many. The school where I taught at, which all these young women are from, was an art school, but it wasn't really done as an art school. But there's so many artists, and so many of them would love to pursue art as a career, which can often, as you say, be very difficult. So if it's not a career, what can you still be doing to value art, to be making sure you're being an artist? Because so often it goes by the wayside. Example of that is I play guitar and sing, and I never do it. And whenever I do it, I just love it, and I get such joy out of it. And I just discovered that I can karaoke with my giant TV and play along with videos now with YouTube, and it's unbelievable with guitar and singing. So how do you
Yeah.
value art in society? Why do we need to value art in society? And then as an artist, how can you continue to make sure throughout your life that art is a part of your life, even if it's not your work?
But I think art reflects the times. When you go back in history and you look at paintings from all around the world, for example, you immediately have a embodied visceral sense of that time. that you're not really going to get from a history book as much. You might learn the facts from a history book, but if you look at whether it's painting, even if you're looking at graffiti in certain parts of the wall, in certain parts of the world, whether it's around the Berlin Wall, you know, people painting, even right now, there's Black Lives Matter, Black Trans Lives Matter in billboards all around this neighborhood, reflecting the time, reflecting the political climate, the social climate. We need artists to tell us what happened and to tell those stories. And without it, I can't, I don't know a world without it. Whether it's, you know, listening to, like, I think about all the different ways throughout my day that I interact with art, whether it's walking by and seeing graffiti, or someone that's painted a billboard, or listening to music, or looking at my rug on my floor that was crafted by someone, right? Which is an art. Or, so I think the world would be a dismal place without art. I also think that art has the power to be an entry point to difficult conversations. I think, you know, when I was working with a group of leaders at this at the organization I worked at, for example, we were trying to address the particular struggle these leaders were having. So I did a poetry exercise where I had them talk about whose struggle do you hold in your body, right? And so they wrote these beautiful poems. But if I had walked into that room and said, "Tell me about your struggles," there's no way to enter that conversation that doesn't feel, to be frank, kind of abusive, right? And so I think art has a really beautiful way of opening up our hearts and our minds to be able to connect with other people. And as far as maintaining your artistic, you know, it's a struggle. I don't know any artist that has a job that doesn't have difficulty maintaining that thread of creativity throughout their life. I struggle with it. You know, my partner is a full-time musician. He struggles with it, and his job is music. You know, I think I can only tell you what's helped me is finding a community of practice. I find when I'm in community with someone, it holds me accountable. Whether it's texting your friend that says, "Did you do your 5 minutes of guitar today?" 5 minutes. No more, 5 minutes. Yes, I did it. Okay, you continue with your day. Whether it's, I think we have a too high expectations sometimes as far as creativity. It's like, well, if I'm not playing guitar and singing for 2 hours a day, why do it at all? And so I've done this with yoga as well. I was like, I'm going to do an hour of yoga a day. No, I'm not. I'm just not. And so I found a 20-minute class, or I'm going to meditate for 20 minutes. No, I'm not. I'm going to do 5 minutes because that's better than not doing it. So I think being able to like have reasonable expectations about our busy lives, and kind of minimizing it to a place where it makes it doable, and then growing from there. If I write once a week for 4 weeks, maybe that's for like 1 hour a week, it's better than nothing, you know. So I think and I think having an accountability buddy is for really anything is a way to connect, and it's you know, it reminds you that we can't do it alone. You know, we can't do any of this alone, really.
That is a great point to end on. I want to continue our conversation. I'm going to stop recording and then I'll continue our conversation a little after that. Thank you, though, for your time. If people, is there any way that our community can help you out or see what you've done or anything that we can share with them as far as the work that you're doing? Because I want them to realize that networking is everything as you expand out and now we're carrying your story with us, that there may be connections that'll help you and help them, and it's just all we can all rise up together. I really feel that way. So is there any way that we can help you, or any resources that we should know about of yours?
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm actually putting together a website, so I don't have that right now. But you can check out the Resistance Revival course on all social media platforms and see what these incredible women are doing. And that is literally art in action, art coming together with social justice work, and using literally their voices to platform what needs to be platformed in this time.
Okay, awesome. I'm excited to check it out. Resistance Revival Chorus. All right, Sabrina, thank you so much. Stay on with me for a minute, but this is the end of our conversation now.